afternoon, everybody. It's Ambassador Kosh coming at you with a brand new video. Told you I'd be back, off work and fresh. Um, and today we're going to continue our 1980s exploration of pop culture. And we're going to shift gears a little bit, genre-wise. Last few videos we've done a little more sci-fi and fantasy type stuff. Today we're going to do something a little more real world, but I think this would be just one that's honestly is a quintessential 80s classic, and it just gets a really good cast, and it had a real impact on 1980s pop culture and everything, and movies that were done along the same vein. And we're going to be talking about Goonies today. Now, I remember this movie quite vividly and everything because it was one that me and my mother went and saw in theaters shortly after my father had passed on, and we actually went to a Saturday afternoon matinee. And we went, and everything, I guess, as I just said, me and my mom, we went and saw this in theaters because she had grown up on similar movies herself, these kind of swashbuckling treasure hunt type of movies. And she saw this and she showed me we saw the trailer on TV, and she's like, "Honey, what do you think of this?" And I was like, "This would actually be really cool to go see." So we picked it a Saturday afternoon, and me and her and everything, we went and got some lunch beforehand, and we went and saw it, and it was a lot of fun. It was a fun movie and everything. It didn't. It had some serious bits to it because it had some adults. It had some real life consequences to it. As I mentioned, it had a really good cast. You had Sean Astin, who went on to be um, Samwise Gamgee in Lord of the Rings. You had Josh Brolin, who we all know what he has done in the last few years. He played Cable in Deadpool, and he also played uh, Thanos in the first Guardians of the Galaxy. Had a cameo in that, and of course he was in Avengers: Infinity War and Endgame. And you've got Chunk, you've got Sloth, and you've got I think it's Corey Haim was in this too, and he plays Mouth. And well, Mouth is a character in and of himself. But the interesting thing about this movie, because you also have um, you got these really nasty criminal types, but they've got kind of a comedic edge to them. You take them seriously because they are rather menacing, but at the same time they're kind of bungling. They almost put you in the mind of Harry and Lloyd from Home Alone. Um, they can intimidate you, but at the same time, they're so dang off the wall goofy that they make you laugh half the time as much as they make you worry about the kids. And I think the interesting thing about Goonies is the fact that you have, for the first time, this kind of team structure that you would see later on in a lot of the cartoons in the 1980s and even into the 1990s. You had the leader, you had the goofy kind of kid, you had um, the brainy kid who made up all the inventions, and in this case, in Goonies, it was I think, what was his name? I think his name was Gadget or something along those lines. If somebody knows, comment down below. And you had all these they were the beginning of tropes that were very common both in kid focused and adult focused movies. But even at my age, this movie really resonated with me. It really stuck with me throughout my adolescence and into my teen years and on. And I think that's true for a lot of people as well because Goonies, it didn't take itself overly seriously, even though as I mentioned, you had real life stakes because um, the town that this takes place in, it's actually up in the northwest of the U.S. I think it's in either um, Portland or no Oregon. Oh, hey everybody, meet our cat Stormy. Say hi, Stormy. Stormy, say hi. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, half the time he looks at me and it's like, Dad, go away. But anyway, getting back to Goonies. The movie itself takes place. It takes place in either, I can't remember if it's Washington State or Oregon, one of the two. And you've got this local legend of this pirate that had stashed his ship and all of his loot and everything in a hidden cave, and had all sorts of booby traps, and there was a treasure map and everything else under the sun. And you find out that a local real estate mogul is buying up all the property in town, and um, the kids and everything that the story focuses around, their homes are under threat of being foreclosed on and being bought up by this real estate mogul. And what ends up happening is the kids get it in their heads to go off and try and find this treasure, One Eyed Willie. That was the name of the pirate, One Eyed Willie. And it just you get caught up in this story, and it's like I said, it's a lot of fun, and it's really, honestly, it's a very imaginative, and honestly, I think it's something that, especially nowadays with all the reboots and all the sequels and everything, and don't get me wrong, I like a good sequel. I like a good sequel to a series of movies or a movie and everything. But the thing is, the 1980s was such an imaginative time for movies, and Goonies actually really captures that sense of imagination and invention and kind of going back and reinventing not so much reinventing the wheel, but see how it can be refined. And Goonies does this very well because, yeah, you've got a kid centric story, but at the same time, it's something that even adults that are kids at heart can latch onto and say, I wish I had gone and done something like this myself, because it just absolutely grabs you and drags you in to this world and everything. And it's our world, it's real world life, but it's plausible. And I think that's a really cool thing about it. Is this story, is it a bit far fetched? Yes, but at the same time, who among us hasn't thought of or dreamed of finding this pirate treasure map and going on this adventure with a group of your friends, and everybody contributes their own talents and skills and everything, and we eventually find this treasure and we're able to save our parents' homes, or we're able to become independently wealthy, whatever way you want to call it. And I think enough people have seen Goonies to know, I'm not really going to spoil it, the kids do find the treasure. Unfortunately, all the way through their quest and everything to find the treasure. Funny thing, Sean Astin, two of his most well known movies, both times involve a treasure of some sort. One they're trying to find, one they're trying to get rid of. But anyhow, what happens is they end up finding the treasure, but you've got these criminals and everything, these bungling criminals. It's like a criminal family. It's a mom and her two brothers, or her two brothers, her two sons, who are brothers that just bicker backwards and forwards all the time, and they're more of a hindrance than a help to the mom. And she's like, I just want to strangle my sons. I do. I want to strangle my sons, but she's like, I need these idiots. She's like, I can't believe I gave birth to you. But at the same time, she did, obviously. But the cool thing about, honestly, the really cool thing about Goonies is it is just a good, clean movie. There's, as far as I recall, there's not a lot of swearing. There's no grotesque violence, obviously, because if I remember correctly, this was like a PG or a PG-13 movie back in the time where you didn't have any swearing, not even one instance necessarily of any swearing. And if it was very mild and everything. You didn't have the S bomb dropped or anything like that. And it was just a fun ride. And you walked out and you're like, that was great. I can't. And at the time, as I've mentioned before, uh, home video was getting started and everything. And Goonies did eventually come out on VHS. And I imagine there were people that just ate the movie up and more than likely bought more than one copy of the movie and everything, because it would wear a tape out. You'd have to go buy another one. And back in those days, VHS tapes with movies on them were not uber expensive. They were fairly affordable. You could go pick up a VHS tape for like 10, 15 bucks maybe. It depends on the movie. If it was a newer movie, if it was an older movie that they had started to, because even back in the 80's and 90's, they were starting to transfer the old, excuse me, the older movies over to VHS. And I'm not I'm not gonna get off track way incredibly so. But Goonies was one of those movies that came out on VHS, and a lot of people hung on to it. Even if they wore the tape out, they still hung on to it. And I just happened to come across it wasn't a VHS version, it was actually on Blu ray. But the neat thing was, the Blu-ray set that I found actually included Goonies and it had Gremlins, which I am going to do a video on, but I'm going to wait until December because I consider Gremlins more of a Christmas movie because it does take place during Christmas time. And then you've got the sequel that they did, I think, in the early, it was either late 80's or early 90's, Gremlins: The New Batch, and I might do that one or anything less when I start jumping into 1990 pop culture because we'll save that for later though. But I would recommend, if you haven't watched Goonies in a long time, go back rewatch it. And if you've never seen it, and even though I've told you part of it, it is still a great ride. It's still a great movie. It holds up incredibly well, especially for the time it was made in. I think it was made in 84 or 85, somewhere along in there. But it was just one of those movies that really transformed my childhood, particularly at a time when things for our family was kind of down because, as I mentioned, my father had just passed, and it gave me something to kind of boost my spirits, even though I was young and everything. It really boosted my spirits, and it was a fun time for me and my mom. And if any of you have kids and they have never seen Goonies, I highly suggest it is a good family movie for um, parents and their kids to watch. And it really doesn't matter what age they are because it is still so relevant and everything to current pop culture. And especially, you get a good sense of pop culture from the 80's in this movie, and you get an idea of what the directors and the producers and the writers were trying to do because this is a Spielberg flick. This is one of Steven Spielberg's movies or anything. I don't think he necessarily directed it. Hold on. We'll find out. Okay, did a little research. Actually, I just got my copy of Goonies out and looked on the back. Actually, Steven Spielberg was an executive producer on this. So was Frank Marshall. He has a connection to someone we don't want. I don't think we really want to discuss. All I'll say is she's currently in charge of Lucasfilm, and we'll leave it at that. But Richard Donner, who actually did a couple of the Superman movies, Superman 1, and he's directed Superman 2. He also, I think he did some of the Lethal Weapon movies and everything with Mel Gibson and Danny Glover. And there's another name and everything that's attached to this movie that's actually relatively popular even now, and that's Chris Columbus. For those of you who might not necessarily be familiar with the name, Chris Columbus did Mrs. Doubtfire with Robin Williams. He did the first couple of Harry Potter movies and everything. And Chris Columbus actually has a writing credit on Goonies. So, hold on. Cats. You gotta love them, right? Even though you sometimes just want to. But anyway. But this was done by a top-notch group of people or anything who knew what they were doing movie-wise. I mean, they were obviously working with Spielberg on this, and we know Spielberg's reputation. He makes good movies. He made good movies in the 80's, the 90's, the 70's, even now. Even though he doesn't direct so much. I think the last one he was really involved with was Ready Player One, which I didn't get a chance to see. I've heard half and half on that, but that's beside the point. I recommend this movie very highly, even if you are just a child at heart. And if you grew up in the 80's like I did, it's something that will just make you feel better inside. So, Um, for whatever it means, I give it 2 thumbs way up. And not just because of nostalgic reasons, but honestly, it is a very good, very well done movie. Acted, directed, written, the whole shebang. So, uh, that's all I've got for you today. So until next time, my fellow nerdologists, remember, I have always been here. Oh, and if you like this video, like, share, subscribe, comment, and I am on Twitter for those of you who follow me on Twitter. For those of you who don't, who see this video, I am under Ambassador Kosh. My Twitter handle is Rogue5778. So until next time, my fellow nerdologists. Talk to y'all later.